What's up everybody, my name is Sen, and I have a lot to talk about regarding Street Fighter 6. I wanted to start things by saying that I think I'm excited. Hadouken! Where I want to kick things off is actually the quote-unquote roster leak. We have a pretty packed roster with a large number of classics as well as a number of other returning characters. From the actual returning roster, I would say I have my eyes on Guile, Cammy, Jury, and Akuma. Now, as far as new characters, we all know that Jamie has been the most promoted so far, but I actually have my eyes on Mimi and maybe JP, and this is just going off of sheer character design. Just looking at what we have for the roster already, I would say it's pretty balanced, enough of the classic characters for the returning or classic player to have a place of familiarity to start from, but also 7 brand new characters for anyone and everyone who feels like experimenting. What makes this leak feel like not so much of a leak is the official page of Street Fighter 6 that Capcom has released so far. It's not too crazy to believe that Capcom threw out a fake leak to kind of stir the pot and get everyone a little hype. As things stand right now, Street Fighter 6 is looking to be released in 2023, hopefully on the early side of that because your boy is rather impatient when it comes to new fighting games. The platform Street Fighter 6 is looking to release on is PS4 and 5, Xbox Series X and S, and of course Steam for PC. My question is this game going to be available for the original Xbox One? Out of what I can tell, it has been confirmed that this title is going to have rollback netcode, which, as we've seen with Street Fighter 5, the example of rollback netcode can vary.
What the f was that?
If we get anything relatively close to Guilty Gear Strive's rollback, I will be perfectly happy with this, but if it's more akin to Street Fighter 5, I think people are going to have their gripes. Now for what this video was actually originally going to be about, and that is the controls. There was a large misunderstanding related to the controls on my part. There will be the traditional controls that every Street Fighter player knows and has come to expect from the franchise, but there's also going to essentially be a simple mode for quick and easy introductory play. I thought the control scheme of the game was exclusively going to be the simplified approach. If that was the case, this video was going to take a very different turn. Kind of the first question that comes to mind is, will the simple control scheme incentivize people to learn the traditional? Special moves can be performed with a button plus a direction, much like Grand Blue. With this, is there going to be a downside to using these special moves in this way? Are Dragon Punches not going to be fully invincible? Is there going to be a cooldown timer or maybe less damage? I'm more than a little interested to see how this game is going to balance the simple control layout. My next question, which I would imagine is fairly easy to answer, is, will the simple control scheme be banned in tournament? As my initial answer, I would have to imagine yes, they would be. If the simple control scheme has access to all the moves the traditional controls do, and there's no drawback, it's going to leave those who are playing on the traditional layout at an extreme disadvantage. Now, if it's balanced in a way that could be allowed in tournament, it would be pretty interesting to think of the storylines of the new generation players versus the classic or legacy players. Let's talk about content. Something I pitched as being important in the overall package of a fighting game is the content outside of the actual fighting. For myself and many other players, it's not really all that important, we just care about how solid the game is we're actually playing. But for the people that need something in way of a single player mode, we'll have World Tour. This is being pitched as a new experience that defies genre labels. It kinda looks like a JRPG to me, but it's hard to say what the mode is actually all about. I want to talk a little bit now about the Battle Hub. I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say that's supposed to convey the feeling of being in the arcade. The idea of a central hub for fighting games is not all that new. I would have to imagine that you can dress up your avatar that is also your avatar for World Tour. The hope here is maybe there's some cool fun minigames to play. One of the biggest things I wanted to touch on was the look of the game itself. I'm going to start with what I like the least and move on from there. And the thing that I do happen to like the least is actually the UI. I just don't think it looks good. Maybe I'm just too used to Street Fighter 5, but it looks like it's trying too hard to be futuristic. Something similar to Street Fighter 5 UI would have been more than fine with me, but maybe I'll warm up to it. One of the biggest points in the UI is the drive gauge. This comes across as a new take on the V-skill or V-trigger system, but it does take some of the critical art gauge as well. Let's start things off with the drive impact. This has a hit of armor, which comes across to me as a focus attack from Street Fighter 4. It also says that it will give a sort of wall splat if used in the corner. Next up we have drive parry, and when I saw that there was a parry in the game, I was more than a little hyped, but I assumed it was going to be something similar to Third Strike, where you have to tap forward based around your opponent's attacks, but it's interesting to see that this defensive mechanic like parry is going to be tied to a resource. Where this takes on the place of the critical art gauge is the ability to EX moves. You are going to be using your drive gauge to use EX moves. Moving on, we have Drive Rush, which somewhat comes across as an FADC, or the Focus Attack Dash Cancel. I assume this is for some version of getting your pressure started or just extending combos. This can be performed after a parry for 1 drive gauge, but also a normal attack for 3. And last but not least, for the drive gauge, we have drive reversal. This comes across as a sort of guard cancel in other games, but I guess it would just be summed up as a V reversal. So many things are focused around the drive gauge, I'm more than a little curious to see how fast this mirror is actually going to recover. Wrapping things up on the overall look of the game, stylistically my interest is peaked. I'm not sure how much of these effects and hit animations will actually stay in the game when it's released, but relating to these hit animations, it reminds me of Killer Instinct. Now for the character models and designs, I think they're pretty solid. It's very nice to see that everyone's aged up a little bit in this game after all this time. Honestly, I hope the game does well. The thing I'm actually worried about, now most of us that play fighting games are more than familiar with Street Fighter and kind of have our hand on the pulse of things, but I'm kind of worried about the people outside of fighting games. Whenever you talk to someone about fighting games, the fighting game that they always bring up is Mortal Kombat. Yeah, they know Street Fighter if you bring it up to them, but I'm just curious to see how it's going to appeal to the more casual audience. Thanks for watching, y'all. I'll see you later. Peace.